Hello, Year 3, and welcome to today's science lesson. Today, we are continuing with our topic on light, and as you can see by our Walt, we are starting to look at shadows, and today we're understanding how shadows are made. Okay, first of all, quick recap. So, have a think about the questions on the screen. So, what do we call something that produces light? What are some examples of sources of light? And how does light travel? So pause the video and have a think about those questions. Okay, so first one, what do we call something that produces light? Well, it's in my next question, isn't it? We call it a source of light. When you thought of some examples, you might have thought of light bulbs or the sun, anything that produces light, a screen, a TV, a torch, anything that produces light. And how does light travel? You might remember that light travels in straight lines, not in ziggy lines or wavy lines or bendy lines. Light travels in straight lines. However, we know that light sources produce lots of light beams, lots of rays of light that all shoot off in different directions. So even though it travels in a straight line, it can light up a big area because it produces so many light beams. And today's question that's going to lead our lesson is, how do we make shadows? And by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to answer that question using brand new scientific knowledge. So shall we get started? To understand shadows, we need to understand different types of solid material. And there's three main types: opaque, translucent, and transparent. You might have heard those words before, and if you did, you might have an idea of what they mean. But we're going to talk about that now. So if you do know, it might be a good idea to quickly pause the video and share with somebody and tell them what you already know. See if you were right. So first of all, we'll look at transparent. Now, transparent are objects where light completely passes through them, meaning that you can see clearly through them. That is mainly things like windows, glasses, um, drinking glasses, usually anything that's been made from glass. But there are some other clear materials as well. But transparent is when you can see through an object really clearly, and you can see what's on the other side of it. Translucent is when some light passes through, but the light's a bit scattered. Not all the light makes it through. So you can't see clearly through it, but you can maybe see shapes through it. Things like tissue paper, for example. If I held a piece of tissue paper up and then shone a torch through it, you would be able to see I'd be able to see some of the things, or people on the other side might be able to see some shapes, things like that, but they wouldn't be able to see very clearly. So some light passes through the object, but some gets left behind. And that leaves us with opaque, which is when an object blocks all the light. Light cannot pass through it, which means all those rays of light stop at the object. And that's going to be most things that we interact with in our normal day-to-day life. So we're opaque because light can't pass through us because we're solid and we block light. Can you think of anything else around you that you can see that blocks light? Or even better, can you see anything that's transparent or translucent? Pause the video and have a look around you. Okay, so you might have spotted a few things. What we're going to do now is I'm going to show you some objects, and since we're not in a lesson, you're just going to have to shout to the screen whether they are translucent, transparent, or opaque. So can you kind of see through them? Not completely. Translucent. Can you see through them completely? Transparent. Or can you not see through them at all? Opaque. A window. That would be transparent because you can see through a window, can't you? Well, that's the whole point of a window, isn't it? So you can see outside. So a window would be transparent. Sunglasses. I would say transparent. However, there is an argument that sunglasses are translucent because, as we learned about last week, sunglasses block a lot of the light which passes through. So technically, they're translucent because not all of the light passes through. But you can see through them clearly, so that sort of makes them transparent. I'd accept either one. A book. Opaque because light cannot pass through a book. It would block the light, wouldn't it? Ice cubes. Translucent for ice cubes because Even though you can see some things through an ice cube, you can't see very clearly because not all of the light passes through the ice cube. So translucent. A glass jar, transparent because you can see what's inside of a glass jar. A coat. Yep. Unless it was a clear raincoat, but the coat that's on the board would be opaque, wouldn't it? Because light cannot pass through that type of coat. But you might have a clear raincoat or a poncho, which might be sort of transparent or translucent. A lampshade. But the picture sort of gives it away. That would be translucent because you can sort of see the shape of a light bulb, can't you, from behind the lampshade? And if you put your fingers in a lampshade and sort of wiggle them about, people will be able to see you wiggling them about. But part of that would be the shadow, but part of it, depending on the thickness of a lampshade, would also be the image. So depending again on the material, it would be opaque or translucent. But looking at the picture here, I'd say that's translucent because I can sort of see the shape of a light bulb. An apple would be opaque because you can't see through an apple. A bottle of water would be, what do you think? Oh, it's not opaque because you can definitely see through it. Transparent or translucent? I'd say translucent because you can't see perfectly through it, but you can see a little bit through it, which means some of the light passes through and some gets blocked. A stained glass window, last one. I'd say translucent because the colour that's on that glass picks up some of the light and blocks some of the light. So with a stained glass window, you can't really see perfectly through it, but you can see through it, just not as well as a normal clear window. Okay. So hopefully, guys, that helps you understand how all around us are our translucent objects, transparent objects, and opaque objects. But how do we make shadows? Well, for a shadow to form, you need usually an opaque object or sometimes a translucent object, but mainly opaque objects, because as we know, they don't let any light through them. That means they completely block the light. When the light hits that opaque object, it stops traveling. It can't travel any further. It can't go through the object. So as it says there, that means it completely blocks the light and it stops it from traveling any further. That means then that there's going to be an area behind that object where no light can reach, unless there's another light source behind. But if we imagine, and we look at the example here, up here we can imagine that the sun would be around this area. The rays of light are shining down, and the man is blocking them, which creates an area behind him where none of the light can reach because he is blocking that area, so the light can't get to it. But other areas behind him, well, the light can get to that quite easily, and around him, the light can get to him. But the light that hits the man stops there. So behind him, there's a patch with no light whatsoever. That's what creates a shadow. So using that information today, you're going to complete a couple activities about opaque, translucent, and transparent objects, and also going to complete a couple activities to show me how shadows are made. But shadows, you can really easily experiment with home as well. Before I carry on, so in your house, there's going to be lots of different light sources. See if you can find a light source and create some different shadows using different objects. And we're going to get more into this next week, but see what happens when you get closer to the light source or further away. How does the shadow change? So have a little experiment as well, a bit of a play of making shadows and seeing how the light is blocked. And right now I'm looking down at my desk and my hand, when I raise my hand, is creating a perfect shadow on my desk because the sun is shining in through my window. So I would be able to experiment and make a different shapes with my hand. So have a go at making different shadows, seeing how you can see that area where there's no light whatsoever. So now we'll have a chat through today's activities. So activity number one, you need to get your data all into your books and then produce a small table that looks like this, has opaque, translucent, and transparent objects. What you need to do is go a hunt around your home and try and see if you can find, let's say, between 3 and 5 examples of each one. Remember, opaque means you can't see through it at all. Translucent means you can see through it a little bit. And transparent means you can see through it perfectly. You can see through it really, really clearly. I can give you all one straight away. Transparent. I'm sure everyone's got a window somewhere that they can see, and a window would be a really nice example. What other transparent things can you find? So that's activity number 1. Activity number 2. For this one, you don't need to be writing anything down in your book. Just have a read through the passage here and see, where do these words belong in the passage? As you can see, we've got some missing spaces in that paragraph there. You need to fill in those missing spaces with the words. You don't need to write them down. Just have a read through and think, what word should go there? So for example, light travels in something lines from a something of light. So I'd be thinking light travels in, what kind of lines does light travel in? Straight, of course, because Mr. Cox just talked about that. So straight would go there from a source of light, because that's what I know. I know that's what something that produces light is called. So once again, you need to read through, have a look at the words. Which words belong in which places? And activity number 3, you do need to answer in your book. You need to write down the question: how do we make shadows? And then underneath, just write me a couple sentences to explain how we make shadows. Think about what I've just talked about then, using all these keywords. So think about opaque, light source, block, material, travels, straight lines, light, and through. Those are all words which are going to come in really handy in your explanation of how shadows are made. But with that, guys, that brings us to the end of today, a slightly shorter one. But next week, we're going to be looking at shadows in more detail. Today was just understanding what are shadows, why are they made? And next week, we're going to be doing more experimenting with shadows. But with that, guys, I will leave you to get on with your work. Have a lovely afternoon. I cannot wait to see what you get up to. Bye, guys.